Ladies and gentlemen, you and I both know that there are few greater things on this earth than finishing a chess game and being told by the computer that you made a brilliant move, or let alone two of them. Well, in this video, I am going to show you my 5 most brilliant moves that I've ever played on chess.com. Now, how did we find this? Well, shout out to the chess.com team because they worked tirelessly to download all of the tens of thousands of games that I've played, and they were able to locate 4,000 brilliant moves, which is actually kind of shocking. I was aghast that I made even that many, and I dug through 350 megabytes of data to find my 5 favorite. All right, timestamps on the video player, here we go. The last one is especially beautiful. And I tried to find some with white and with black, but to be honest, about 80% of my brilliant moves come with white, which is pretty incredible. So I'm going to take you through kind of the games and the critical junctures, and I hope you enjoy. This is a game that I played against Last Dragon from Ukraine, and I made their profile picture Pashka bread because why not stereotype cultures in a positive way by showing their, best food? So this is a Scandinavian defense invitation to play a Portuguese or an Icelandic gambit if white tries to defend this pawn in some capacity, not just taking back with the queen. Portuguese gambit is in my black repertoire. I have a course. There's a link in the description. It's called Black Gambit's Repertoire. I love it. And the idea is this. You just go for very rapid development. You hit the queen, and you delay the recapture here, and then finishing your development like that. The most fun Portuguese gambit is when white defends this pawn by stopping your initiative by kicking out your bishop, because this is, according to the engine, the best move, and a well-prepared player will go for it by then kicking out your bishop once again before defending this pawn. This is, according to the engine, the best way to play. The problem is, it is extremely dangerous for white, and if you make one misstep, your entire house collapses. And that's kind of what happened in this game. I played the move e6. This is still my notes. And when my opponent takes, I don't even take back. I invite the capture on f7 and moving my king out of the way. Why do I do this? Why would anybody play like this? Well, the point is you have 3 pieces developed versus 0. You are about to have a 4th, and you can have a 5th on the e-file against this open king. And there are games that violently fall apart like this, when now the queen is also able to infiltrate. And this is why I love this opening, because it's absolutely terrifying for white, right? So my opponent saw this and decided not to take my pawn on f7. A lot of people do this. They pump the brakes, and that is still the best move. So here I played bishop before check, and then I took back, and then I castled. And my opponent took on g6 and must have felt quite okay in this position with their kind of rebuilt center and decent grasp of everything. The problem is that it's far from over. I continue my assault on the center with the move e5. Now, here white should probably ignore me and castle, because white tries to close the center, but this actually allows me to leap inside the white position. The best way for white to play here is to take with the bishop and then the queen, but my opponent opted to do knight takes d4. And here I got a little bit curious, I must tell you, and I decided not to take back on d4 and instead play knight takes g4. So I have sacrificed a ton of material, and my intention is to go queen h4 check and attack the king. If my opponent plays fg, which is the best move, it's to call my bluff and try to run away. I was intending queen g5, maybe I was intending rook here or rook here, and Stockfish can defend this position against me. Last Dragon 2, I don't know where Last Dragon 1 is, by the way. Hopefully not dead. Probably cannot. That was my intention. But of course, it's blitz, so you're going to obviously play a little bit more aggressively. Opponent went back to c2, though. They did not take my knight. They went back to c2. I gave a check, and we have the following position. Now, after that relatively lengthy introduction of just about 3 minutes, but if you can't last more than 3 minutes, that's a skill you must develop, not just for chess. In this position, I detonated the first brilliant move of this video. It looks like my attack has absolutely slowed down. I have to basically bail out at this point. I have to take the bishop, maybe find another way in. But here, and you're more than welcome to pause before I tell you the answer, the move is rook takes f3. You always need to look for things that are only guarded by the king, because oftentimes the king has to be the defender and walk out into the open. Rook f3 is a shocking move. The eval goes from a +1 to -5 in one go. Now, obviously, when you get faced with a move like this, you probably have to take it, because what else do you do, right? I mean, if you just let me hang out here, I'm going to crush you. So my opponent takes, and that allows my rook to come in, And we have the same position, but there's no f-pawn, which allows the next brilliant move. Rook f2. 2 rooks sacrifice right next to the king's face, and the king's defenses are shredded. If you take on f2, it's takes, it's king here, it's e4. And knight here, it's mate. It's a checkmate surrounded by the queen, bishop, and knight, even though I'm down 2 rooks. So my opponent doesn't want to do this. Instead, my opponent decides to run, abandon everybody. The problem is that in this position, I still have the move e4, although it was actually slightly more accurate to play knight takes bishop. We're not going to talk about that, though. e4! Knight e4, and I hunt the king out into the open. c5, check. Opponent could consider pawn takes here, en passant, and trying to hang out back there, but the opponent just makes a run for it. Just grabs the knight and runs, and in this position, because it's blitz, I, for some reason, did not see mate in 1. But that's why I included this game, because it was very funny. That's mate in 1. But, you know, when you see mate in 1, you might as well go for mate in 4. And my opponent's king gets smothered to death in my territory among my pieces, while all the pieces of my opponent stood all the way back there doing nothing. So, very fun game. Rook takes f3, followed by rook f2 infiltration. This is why I love the Portuguese gambit. It leads to these super creative games where instead of checkmating your opponent in one move, you checkmate them in a couple. But I digress. Now, I also tried to find games, this is the next brilliant game, I tried to find games that didn't just have a violent checkmating nature, also like very interesting tactical combinations that are super rare. This is a game against a talented guy. He's a teenager, Agent JL, aka Justin, and I'm playing into you know, his kind of solid fianchetto setup by trying to trade off his pieces. He advances on the queen side. We have a very locked structure that slowly begins to open up, but I definitely give him an advantage here with this bishop coming to a3. So white is doing very well. I try to block his diagonal, and he's infiltrating and he's trying to create some havoc in my position. We trade knights, but the brilliant moment comes right here, where it seems like I've kind of solidified. My pawns are advancing on his king. Once again, we have created a kingside attack, and the computer wants me to move this way and kind of try to play down the middle of the board using my more active queen and so on. But I am not stockfish. I prefer to solve matters by force, which is the move f3. What I had envisioned if f3 happens is king h1 is just jail. It's jail for these 2 pieces. But if my opponent takes, it's time for brilliant move number 2. And brilliant move number 2, you would think, has something to do with a king attack. It doesn't. Although, rook takes f3. What? But I just said, but okay. Well, now you're obviously looking at rook f8, but then the king just goes back to where it came from. So then you say, okay, well, I'm going to go queen h3. You can't go back. And the king's like, so? What am I afraid of? Rook f8 check is impossible if I move my queen out of the way, right? So what's the idea of rook takes f3? It's this. This is an incredible, like, this just almost never happens, right? And the point is, I'm going to win 2 pieces for the rook, and I'm going to have a winning advantage. That's the point. I sacked my rook, hunted the king into the open, but I backwards move. And if you sack the queen, obviously, at the end of this, I have a fork, so I'm picking up a bishop. And queen d5, here's the cherry on top. Queen d5 is a great move. I can't just take the bishop, I hang my queen. I can't take the queen and then take the bishop, because then I hang my knight. All tactical sequences that are considered brilliant have like a cherry on top. The point is that after queen d5 offering a trade, I slide into the check and out of the way of the queen, and then I pick up the bishop. But obviously this is a blitz game, so it takes like 50 more moves to convert. We will slowly kind of go through it. But the bishop, that sacrifice of getting the rook out of the way and the clearance for bringing the bishop back to hit the other diagonal was very nice. And it took a while. It's blitz. What are you going to do? Had to convert it into an endgame, into knight and bishop versus rook, which 9 times out of 10 is better for the knight and the bishop. Slowly, we hunt down the pawns, and this game ends with my passer, right? So I have, I've cleared off the pawns. My bishop sacrifices itself for the remaining pawn. My e-pawn goes down, and we walk with the king. Although it actually took a little bit of time to win this game, because we both had about 5 seconds on the clock. How do you win when you have 5 seconds on the clock? You got to make a queen, and if you can, make a second one. So I got the knight out of there, I cut the king off on the a-file, and I delivered ladder mate with 3 seconds on my clock. But rook takes f3 and sliding the bishop back to f8, I really like that. It was a very unique one, and like I said, I honestly don't have a lot of brilliant moves with black. I don't know. I should try to get more brilliant with the black pieces. But with black, it's usually just like a checkmate in 2, and the computer calls it brilliant. So not all these moves are brilliant per se. But now we're going to begin, in my opinion, the Hall of Fame. I really searched long and hard for these games, and yeah, they were all 3 of these are just super fun games from start to finish. So this is a Blitz game in the middle of a slump. As you can see, I'm 2400, which is not too shabby, but it's also the lowest rating I had in like years. And I'm playing against the NFM, who I also am stereotyping. This is a German FM, and that's Schnitzel. So anybody without a profile photo got food from their country. So, you know, Schnitzel, Germany. Yeah. B3. So we go for a Nimso Larsen, and my opponent plays a setup where they're solidifying the center with their pawn. And what I did here is I attacked the center, got my bishop out of the way, and attacked the center once again. So basically, the entire integrity of the black position depends on that center pawn on d5. And it's really hard to protect with a pawn. So if you could protect this with a pawn, you would be much happier. The problem is that if you don't protect it with a pawn, and I try to play knight h3, knight f4, if you don't have a pawn there, I'm just going to keep expanding. I have a target, right? A pawn is not really a target. A knight is very much a target. So that's what I do. My opponent tries to rotate out, but that kills time. And so I play b4 and c5 and a4. Like I have something to attack even if you do get out of the way. But obviously the position is in the balance. h6, b5, g5, a5, and my opponent plays h6 looking to close everything down. Now, at this point, if I play b6, I'm just a complete moron, but I do still have some prospect in the future of maybe trying to break through, especially where you have more space, and the only thing preventing you from just rolling down the board are 2 pawns, right? Instead of playing b6, I take on a6 because I just assume that this is going to be a long-term weakness. And I continue to expand on the queen side. Just not a care in the world for my king. I'm not really worried about anything coming over here. Rook b8, castles, and I play bishop a3. Now, bishop a3, the point is that if my opponent does just let's pass the move back to me, I have obviously bishop a6, but also rook b6. I mean, if I can transfer 2 rooks that are looking at each other like this deep into my opponent's territory supported, at some point the dam will break, open up for me, and I will flood into the position, right? So my opponent actually has the same idea. My opponent plays rook b5. And obviously I'm going to take the rook, but if you play knight b5, cb5, and get something like this, I've just been completely repelled. So my opponent sacrifices material to plug the queen side. Well, I definitely can't have that, right? Because I can't have the queen side plugged. So takes, and now we play brilliant move number 3, which is I'm sacrificing my bishop to invest completely into the ruin of your queenside. So now I've wrecked the whole thing for the cost of a piece, and my A and C pawns are going to walk together. The blockade of black was completely unsuccessful, but the thing I love the most about this game is that on its own you could be like, oh, well, that's not that brilliant. I mean, duh, you're just gonna promote. It's not that easy. My opponent is not just gonna let me walk into their territory. They're going to try to put up resistance. So, right, all their pieces have been transferred to the queen side. Rook f7 is gonna patrol the 7th rank. In truth, I've sacked 2 pieces. So I have less actual physical pieces participating in this game. So, queen b7, I'm looking for a queen trade. Opponent doesn't want one. So here comes my rook. I have brought in my forces. It's actually funny. All brilliant games sometimes have small asterisks. Here, rook f7 is really strong. Don't say I mentioned that though. We're just gonna kind of leave that out of there. But I also wanted to show examples where I'm human and I don't just completely mow my opponents down. It's actually one of the most positive most positive feedback I tend to get from folks is they actually like to see my mistakes and they don't always enjoy when I play perfect games because we're all human. We all make mistakes. Rook f7. Don't tell my opponent. Knight a5. Attacks my queen. I go queen b8, still looking for a queen trade. Now bishop c6. Okay, so how are we going to break through in this position? We're going to try to remove the defender of key squares. The problem is that it's not really happening yet. And knight c4 attacks my rook. By the way, if you notice, I'm still hanging my queen so I can get a new queen. But how are we going to tip the balance here over completely winning for white? We're going to play our second brilliant move of this game, ignoring the threat on the rook as well. Rook is hanging, queen is hanging, but we bring the second rook to escort the a-pawn. The only reason I'm not rushing with a8 queen is that it can just be taken, and I've just lost the pawn for nothing. So I play rook a1, and my opponent takes my rook and is now up a little bit of material if you do the math, but obviously my A and B pawns are super strong. And yeah, I mean, the conversion of this game is maybe the most fun part. So I have a very nice position, but at some point I just go, you know what? To hell with the queen side. I gotta open up a new front of attack with the move f4. While my opponent is completely stuck defending over there, f4, and g4 looks like it solves problems, but not really, because I just start bringing my knight over there too, yeah, we begin to wreck this position. Bishop goes back to f8, and we have a little bit of a disaster of a tactical skirmish here, because we probably have about 10 seconds on the clock, so g6 check instead of queen takes knight. But we end this in style by sacrificing the queen on f8. Takes, a8 queen is now a threat of promotion. Opponent does this. I can queen. I can just give a check. But we win the game with checkmate in 2. Obviously, when things get to about 5-7 seconds on the clock, you know, things get a little bit wild. Sometimes things go wrong. Yeah, I mean, this game was just a lot of fun because it's just an armada advancing on the queen side. And the goal of the video, as I'm saying, is to show different positions, not always just attacks on the king. And sacrificing through to break a barrier like this is a very instructive way to break apart close positions and positions where you have more space, because even at the cost of material, pawns like this, with the right support, evolve and flourish into amazing things. You know, just like young kids or teenagers with the right support system, you know, a little bit of sacrifice on the parents' behalf, financial, you know, maybe to get the kids into better spots in life. I don't know. Hopefully that inspires some of you. Anyway, fourth example. This is a game against an FM from the UK. At least that's their flag on chess.com. Looks like Chess Sir is the username, and this one was also fun. In this game, we go for a B3 French. This is one of my fun variations in that I recommended in my E4 course, the first course that I ever made. And back then, I would like make the course and try to play it in blitz games to show the ideas, and that was quite fun. And yeah, this one is a gambit. You're just gambiting this to try to win it with this, and a long castle. Opponent doesn't take my gambit, and instead we have a very imbalanced structure. So I've brought my queen out here to monitor the movement of the dark squared bishop. My opponent has brought the pawns out here to monitor my king. If I go long, they're going to attack me. But that's the nature of the game. So g6 is trying to either put the bishop here or kick my queen out and make sure that I can't take g7. I play h4 to attack that pawn. They play h5 to kick me out. And I go here in order to play the move g4. And yeah, I mean, queen c7, knight c3, a6. So am I going to castle long is the question, because obviously my opponent wants to play b5. Am I scared? No. Go ahead and play b5. I need to move my king out of the way. And at some point I need to play g4, knight g5. And this game and the next game are just absolutely nuts. So these games are totally wild, which is why I wanted to share them. So b5 played, and here we go with knight g5. Opponent plays knight b6, and I play knight e2. Before I'm going to play g4, I just want to move out of the way because the pawns are going to come down like an avalanche, right? So what does opponent do? a5. So just like last game, the armada has been built. They are ready to come down on me with a4, c4, b4. We have a queen here, 2 knights, rook. It looks like just a massive warship. But g4 is also a problem. I mean, I'm going to take this. I'm going to go for f5. Opponent plays a4. Do I take? Do I acknowledge the advancement on that side of the board? I take. And here I realize, lost in this whole movement is the fact that my knight can actually go back. Because if you do an instant replay, back here, this is a very solid pawn. But when you try to use the A pawn as a weapon, the B pawn destabilizes. And now that's a bit of a problem, because the only way to deal with it is probably to push it forward. But then knight b5. I mean, I'm going to get knight b5 no matter what, right? So my opponent decides to take on b3. I take back. Oh, sorry. I take on b5 first. So I attack the queen, and then I go like this. Now, admittedly, it's a commitment to put my knight there, because it can just be a target for the attack. Like, if you remove a pawn from your opponent, they still open the file. I mean, look at this, right? You can argue that black actually has struck first. Luckily, I have my bishop covering all that, right? So I'm up a pawn, but the game is far from over. Bishop d7, looking to move and hit my knight. So it's time for me to attack, and I play f5. That move does not look like it creates a threat. That looks like it's just a free pawn. But my idea is e6. And let's not forget that even though this bishop is playing defense, this bishop is playing offense too. There's a rook on the other side of the board. So I play f5. Opponent moves the rook off of this diagonal and tries to reinforce. So what do? Take, and I see an opening. Queen f3. We've arrived. Queen f7. If you're looking for the brilliant move, it hasn't arrived just yet, I promise. It's technically arriving a little bit later. I would have told you. Knight d8 prevents checkmate. Okay, so the knight has moved out of the way. The bishop is still hitting this knight. And at some point, that infiltration will happen. c4, bishop here. But who's going to get to who first, right? So bishop d3. Opponent plays c4. Opening up the bishop to try to get mine, hitting this. If I take my foot off the gas here and take on c4, I'm almost immediately losing. I mean, the difference between life and death here is so tiny, right? It's just so small. And there's a variety of creative ways to lose. You can get checkmated in one, you can also get checkmated in a rook sack and bishop a3, and you just get smothered. If, mate in 1, mate in 3, about the same thing. So I have to ignore both threats on my bishop and my knight, rook f1. I'm ignoring this, and I'm focusing on the f-file. Opponent moves out of the way, and now we begin the demolition process. I wish this move got a brilliant sign. It didn't. Bishop sacrifice on g6. Just take a bishop. Why? Because queen h5, and I'm threatening this. Opponent here plays bishop takes b5 and runs away with their king, and it looks like they're escaping. It actually looks like I've messed this up. But rook f7, which I also wish got a brilliant exclam. Unfortunately, it didn't. Rook f7, the point is that if they take, I'm going to go check, and they can't run anywhere. For example, let's say the king goes to d8, I have knight takes f7. If the king goes to c7, I take the bishop with check, and the second that you try to block, I get this too. So I'm actually getting to this king much faster. And I'm getting all my material back that I sacrificed, right? So opponent decides not to take me and take on b3, and that looks very scary. But now we get the brilliant move marker, because it looks like I have no way through. Looks like if they don't take the bait, they're fine. But I wasn't moving my rook here to sacrifice it like this. I was moving my rook to bulldoze the king. And that move is deemed brilliant because, according to the chess.com algorithm, it's usually the only move to either keep the balance or completely win the game. So we go from a balanced game to +6 because the incoming assault on the king is absolutely devastating. King takes, and now queen at g7 check, queen h7 also very beautiful. Point is that here I go knight e4, which is that's just beautiful. You try to go here or here, and if you get taken, this one tempo allows rook g1. And my rook, you just can't stop ladder mate. It's incredible. You play knight d7 to try to play this. It's rook g7, but rook g8. I mean, yeah. Instead of queen h7, I played this because I saw that I can move my knight to h7 and reroute it this way. So I could have done this in a handful of ways, but I decided knight h7 here, and my opponent ends up blundering mate in 1, although it was already very, very hopeless around here, and it would have led to a lot of material loss. So yeah, I mean, just a completely insane game. I really wish more of these got brilliant moves, like bishop g6. The reason bishop g6 doesn't get a brilliant move is the engine also thinks I can do this before bishop g6. So bishop g6, a full bishop sacrifice, infiltrating, and then bringing in my rook, sacking it, and just leaving the king naked. Just in general, the king is better when it's naked. Because, you see me here, I'm kind of clothed. Yeah, that sentence can be taken out of context, I suppose. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to show you the grand finale. This game, I played against an individual who had the exact same rating as me, which is quite rare on chess.com. This also is an individual who closed their account, but not after this game. So every other person that I played in this video still has their account open. This person closed their account, but like 6 months later. I doubt it was some sort of PTSD. Yeah, this was an amazing game. I'm very happy with this game. So, by the way, another Nimso Larsen. Although, it's funny, I don't play this that much anymore, but I guess this opening allowed me to be creative. So from the opening, I go in a weird outflank, and the point is I'm trying to get this bishop. So if you leave this bishop out here, I'm going to take it. The opponent chooses to be really stubborn and moves the bishop out of the way, but this actually allows me to go for this flank pawn expansion. Looks like I guessed the elo game, and it's not easy to stop f5. You play g6, you lose this rook. So opponent has to do this, and we get a really weird position already just very early, right? So we have a position where the light squared bishop of black just looks really dumb. And even though I've given up a bishop pair, this bishop is so strong, right? So h5, preventing g4, but I say I'm not really interested in g4. I'm interested in e4. I'm castled. I'm allowed to push the pace. If you move the knight out of the way, then I play f5. If you take, you undouble my structure, and I'm just very happy, right? So I'm doing quite well. So I take over the initiative with the move e4. Opponent gives me a check, which doesn't deter my plans much. I just play king h1, and now f5. So bishop c8. White is much better. But how is white actually going to win the game? Improvement, queen e2. Slight improvement of the position. I'd love to do something in the center, but this pawn's too delicate. Opponent goes knight g4. I play h3. h3 on its own is a threat on the knight, but it's a little bit dangerous because if I take it, then there is this, and my king is actually dead just completely in the corner. So when I play the move h3, the point is really to threaten this in the future. Just give it a little bit of time, and at some point I will actually decide what to do. So opponent plays e6, just trying to activate the dark squared bishop here. I play knight c3. So I'm finishing my development as well. And now e takes d5. It's time to begin chopping down the middle. In general, if you have a lead in development and you have all your pieces out and about and the opponent's king is in the middle, you should be looking for ways to open up the position. And in this case, I went for knight takes d5. That is not the brilliant move, but that is a very, very powerful move. Again, I'm much better here, so a lot of moves are good, which is why it's not considered brilliant. But knight takes d5, e takes d5, and now rook a e1. Bishop a3 is even stronger. So going off of this diagonal and just going for that diagonal. And yeah, I mean, black is almost completely lost already, but I played rook e1. But this allows castles. This is what I thought. I thought it allows castles. And even though I get the bishop, there's no king anymore. So I'm a little bit sad, right? I'm a little bit sad that there's no king. It would have actually been better for my opponent to play queen d6 and just try to hang on. Although, admittedly, that's a very scary proposition. Because, you know, bishop b2, and now you can't castle, your king is still in the middle, very scary. So opponent just says, you can have my bishop, but at least my king is safe. I have knight f2 check. The thing about this, though, is that I foresaw the next entire sequence. And this is why I'm super proud of this. Obviously, knight f2 check is a move that if you have to go to g1 is really bad because you're going to get double checked, right? Knight takes h3. But king h2 is what any normal person plays here. There's no more checks. But knight takes d3 looks a little unpleasant. I didn't want to allow this. I didn't know if this was good. I didn't know if I still can go for checkmate ideas because I have so much activity. And then I foresaw the entire sequence of moves here. And you're more than welcome to pause. Maybe you've seen this tactical pattern. But this is why I saved this for the grand finale. In this position, I saw that I can play rook takes knight. Now that is not that difficult to see. It's not that difficult to foresee this entire sequence of moves. After this, I saw that I should probably move the queen away from my pieces. I really like this move, bishop d4. And my idea here was that the queen on g3 no longer harasses, it doesn't harass my second rank. I'm kind of free to move around here. At first I was thinking some f6, but then I realized, wait a minute. I have bishop e5, bishop d6, right? So I can actually get my first point was that I was going to do this. I didn't like that because there was bishop takes f5. And all of a sudden this is actually protected. So I repeated once because you got to repeat. Got to repeat moves one time, right? My opponent was probably hoping for a draw. But then I was like, nope, we're not going to repeat moves. Bishop e5, queen f2, queen takes f8 check. What? And I realized that I don't have to just go and attack the rook with my bishop. I can force the entire damn sequence. If king h7, queen g7 is mate, so you have to take bishop d6, only move, king g8, rook e8 check, only move, king h7, knight to g5. And I thought it was really smart because if the queen was here, I can't do this. So I thought, I just got so excited I spit. Hopefully you didn't see that, although I just confessed to it. I thought this was all forced here, and this looks like mate, but you take my knight, so first I take on f7, and my brilliant pawn on f5 holds the king back, and now it's mate. It's a forced checkmate in 6 knockout. I was so hyped to play this. I was like, woo! Sack my queen for a beautiful mate. I thought this was all forced. I was like, wait, this is so genius, right? Queen f2, I get my bishop out this way, right? So I repeat once, and then I sack the queen, because again, I can't play the sequence. I can't do this if the queen is on g3. So I had to force the queen back to f2. I thought it was so smart, right? And it looks so amazing. But you know what the craziest thing is? Turns out that I'm not that brilliant after all. Because I could have done this right here. For some reason, mentally, I thought that bishop d4, bishop e5 allowed me to get to this diagonal. I completely forgot that I could just go like this. So right after this game, I was like, whoa, I'm so smart. And of course, the computer considered bishop d4 a blunder before giving me credit for the brilliancy. Yeah, I mean, king f8, bishop a3. I could have gone for the exact same sequence off the bat, but with the bishop out over here. But I thought I was a super genius. Turned out I was only a small genius. So... oh, that concludes this video, folks. I hope you enjoyed. Obviously, a lot of these games were just very, very belligerent attacks on the king, but not all brilliancies are reduced to that. Sometimes brilliancies get you back into the game from a losing position. Sometimes the computer just evaluates brilliancies inaccurately and based on the game situation, like it was the only move, but you still get credit. So I spent about an hour, maybe 90 minutes digging up the content for this video, looking through all the PDFs. Shout out to the chess.com team who found all these games and then put them very nicely into a nice format, and appreciate y'all very much. And let me know if you want a video of my best blunders, because I think that will be fun. Till next time, I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.